Hey everybody, this is Janice, and this weekend was my 10th anniversary with Twitter. And I'm not sure, anniversary presents may have gotten lost in the mail with all the bad weather last week. But really, it's a weird thing to take note of an anniversary like that, and yet it was so different to have that period of time, right? Like, when I started on Twitter, I thought it was just like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I had no idea of what would become of it. And over the years, the things that have happened in agriculture based on various individuals getting online, a lot of whom joined about 10 years ago, it deserves to take a little note. So I'm gonna do a video thanks to some friends helping me out. And I hope some of you also share, here's been your experience, especially some of the other people who've been at this for so long. And then another thing I would love to do is for people to share their first tweet. So this is mine. Yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing. I used a word like twittering. All right, so anyway, shortly after that, I started talking about cotton though, so we're good. All right. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Bye. All right, so first we're hearing from Ryan, who lost his voice. So I'm gonna ask the question he sent me, which is, if you could go back 10 years, what advice would you give yourself on what or what not to do on Twitter? All right, so Ryan, that's a funny one. I'm not one of those people who does really well by going back in time and sort of telling people, you know, here's what I would tell my 20-year-old self. But for Twitter, I always said you should have picked a shorter name. So in the days of 140 characters, it was really important. And I didn't think of that. I picked my name based on some friends in high school had called me JP. I really wasn't called JP anywhere else, but it was me, okay? And then I liked the idea of being positive. And I knew that I knew more about cotton than most people, and I didn't want to pretend I knew agriculture as a whole. So I was really comfortable representing cotton, and I still am. So it's kind of fun that, you know, all these years later, here I am, still JP Loves Cotton. It turned into a brand. And so I would have been something much shorter, like JP, maybe even was available back then, but I didn't think about it. I wanted to convey enough about myself that people would know what to talk to me about, and so that's how I got it. I also, 10 years ago when I got into this gig, I really had no idea of sort of looking at things as a long term, and while I would like to say, you know, I could have done things differently if I'd known, if I'd thought about it, if I'd been more strategic, I don't know that it would have been really better. It would have just been different. So I'm not sure I'd tell myself too many other things, but a shorter username, because I was on early. I could have gotten a much shorter one. JP Loves Cotton. It's a lot of characters.
Janice, it's Jazzy. And I was just wondering, you were on Twitter pretty early. Why did you feel like, as a voice in ag, it was an important space and community for you to get engaged in?
Okay, so Jazzy, this probably sounds like a little bit of a humbling thing, but I'm still not sure I need to be involved in Twitter. I knew agriculture really needed to be involved in Twitter, and at our office, Kathleen was in charge of the account, and she wanted some people who knew agriculture better than she did. So she was not from ag and had recently graduated college, and so she wanted people with a different depth of knowledge of the company and agriculture to get on, and I was one of the people chosen. So, you know, it's kind of strange, but that's how we got to me being on there. I did think, you know, I know cotton pretty well, so that's good. I'd worked in it a long time already, but now it's kind of strange to think, you know, a lot of people think, here's why I need to be on there, is I want to get the news, or I want to be able to share my viewpoint. I signed up as a bit of more of a whim. Really did not have a long-term view of it, and it's really strange to see what's happened in the 10 years since, because I don't think it's all about Twitter. I think it's about a number of platforms, so we'll see what the next 10 years brings.
Hey Janice, it's Jody. What was ag Twitter like 10 years ago?
Okay, so Jody, it's funny. You ask about what ag Twitter was like 10 years ago. There really wasn't an ag Twitter. I don't know how to tell people that. 10 years ago, Twitter was just Twitter. At the time, there were some celebrities on there, so it's really funny when you think about it. Ashton Kutcher was having a contest with CNN in 2009 to see who could get to 1 million followers first. And it was actually Ashton Kutcher. So the celebrity voice won over the news, and I think that's pretty foretelling for today's world, Not exactly what we'd like. But it was really very interesting. So in those earliest days, I actually would search for just the word Monsanto, and it would be so few mentions that I could actually scroll through them. Would usually use just a hashtag like farm, if that, maybe cotton. It also was really strange in that you only followed some people. You didn't follow like thousands like I do now. And you actually saw almost all the tweets from all the people you were following, which is really very interesting. Not long after I joined, so blog chat started in March of 2009, I think it was. Mac will correct me. Blog chat, and I got on it pretty early. I started a blog in 2009 in the fall, so I think that's probably when I started getting on blog chat a little bit more. And ag chat started in the spring of 2009. In those early days of ag chat, it was really very interesting because in those early days, it was kind of like every week or two, there was new farmers online and new people to talk to and new perspectives to hear. And, maybe they knew somebody we had met in person or things along that line. It was really kind of cool. So all of those things kind of shaped what I think of as Twitter in a decade ago. It's funny though, so many of the people that I knew joined in that same time frame. So, Mace Thornton at Farm Bureau and Mike Haley in Ohio and Ryan Goodman. There's so many people who joined in that same time frame of 2009. It really was a growth time for Twitter as well for ag Twitter. So.
Hey Janis, congrats on 10 years on Twitter. So I'm curious, how have the questions and conversations changed over the last decade?
Wow, Jennifer, how have conversations changed in that time is drastically, I think, is the answer. So early on, because you could see the content that all the people you were following shared routinely, you could have longer conversations, right? There weren't so many voices out there that you could actually have conversations that took several days. People would come back to them and they would continue them. The dialogue would keep going. I think there were probably much more depth of conversation. I remember having conversations with people who had really different perspectives than mine. And quite frankly, really different opinions on things. Early on, there were a few people, and occasionally they would feel a bit like trolls, but a few people there who really just had a very different opinion. And part of what made it more possible is everybody in ag would kind of tell each other, hey, look, I know you may want to pay attention, or that guy seems to maybe want to bring out your worst side, so you may just want to step away from the keyboard with that one. So people kind of looked out for each other a little bit and kind of helped people avoid some of the pitfalls that maybe they had. And now it's so hard. You have so many people from ag on there that it's hard to know everybody, right? And it's really hard to think about the impact one person can have sometimes in a world where it's gotten so crowded. But I think that's still really important for us to think about, is the impact one person can have, because I think it still happens on Twitter. It certainly happens in podcasting and YouTube and blogging and Facebook and stuff. And I think a lot of us forget it.
Hey, this is Debbie from kidscowsandgrass.com, and Janis, I'd love to know if there's any specific days or events that stand out to you over your last decade in Twitter.
Debbie, I love that you asked about some of the things that really stand out for me because, you know, it's funny, you were involved in a couple of them. Early on, I can remember the first time the Petersons did a video, and one of your girls had gone to school with them, and you sent it to me, and you're like, wow, this is fun. Look what these kids have done at K-State. And I said, oh my God, that's going to go viral. And we ended up connecting with Greg at that time and offering him help on, you know, did he know how to handle media interviews and media requests when they came in, because I really thought he was going to get some, and he did. You know, he ended up on morning shows, and the whole family went to New York and stuff. It was really very cool. So that was a big one. It was kind of cool to see how ag could come together and sort of around a specific topic and get attention for that. So there was one year where we made Twitter Moo, and just using the hashtag Moo. It was Mike Haley's birthday wish, and it was because, as is today, dairy farmers were in a pretty precarious position, and Mike wanted those people to feel a little bit happier, and at the same time help some consumers better understand what was happening in the world. And so it was a really neat program, but the whole day, as we did everything we could to get people to share a tweet that said hashtag Moo in it. We also, Ray Proc and Gilmer Dairy and me and some others sat there and tried to answer everybody who started asking, like, why in the hell is everybody using the Moo hashtag? And so it was really an opportunity to talk to consumers that hadn't really thought about the dairy industry and have this conversation about it. It was really very cool. I can remember I was on my way to a meeting in Dallas, and in the cab the whole way there, I was tweeting. In the meeting, I kept trying to listen to the presenters and at the same time answer to tweets and stuff. So it's really cool. Yeah, which means you could actually get things to trend 10 years ago, 9 years ago, based on something like that, instead of necessarily having a massive news event. So it was just very different. You could mobilize people. Another one was we used to do something around food thanks at Thanksgiving, and I can remember Penn Jillette retweeted some of our information about Norm Borlaug. I always loved Penn and Teller, and so that was a pretty huge one for me personally, because I got to have a whole conversation with him, and I just felt kind of like the world was really exciting. Let me see, what are some of the others? You know, there's some pretty sad times too. Like, a lot of times people ask you when are the really tough times, and people think they understand. They think it would be about me working for Monsanto and people saying less than positive things. But really the days that stand out as negative or really painful days were, I can remember when Jill and her family lost a barn to a fire. Chris and her family had a tornado on their farm. There was a major snowstorm that really hit the Dakotas, Atlas, and really had a massive impact on cattle in that area. We've lost too many people to either suicide or accidents, including a guy who, you know, like it's amazing how these people become so real and such dear friends. You know, one of the first people I knew that we lost early on was a guy who took my nephew's Flat Stanley and showed him all around the meat labs at Penn State. And not only did he do that, but he made like a little tiny like white lab coat and a little tiny hard hat for Flat Stanley, which I thought was hysterical. So there were all those things. There's also been weddings, you know, meet a lot of people that you hadn't met in real life, but you felt like you knew them forever. And some of them we've gotten to go to their weddings, celebrate their children being born, that kind of stuff. So lots of good ones. Can't believe I forgot. Ag Chat submitted panels to like South by Southwest really early on. Kelly Rivard Stans. She worked hard on that with Nathan Wright and some people, and it was really very cool to get South by. So Chris Chen, Zach Honeycutt. I'm trying to remember who else. I can't remember. Emily Swaber. I'm sure there was somebody else. But anyway, it was very cool. And we're still doing stuff at South by Southwest. So people should be looking at what's coming up.
Hey Janice, it's me, Matthew from Rice Farming TV. And I wanted to know how you have witnessed other advocates for agriculture reach beyond their industry, beyond their fellow farmers, beyond their tribes to educate the general public with their message. How have advocates broken through the echo chamber and connected with those that need to hear them most?
So I think when you think of the successes, they may not all be attributed back to Twitter, but I think they all have their foundations in Twitter because so many of us were able to meet people with shared passions. And then we found each other on all these other platforms and we moved things into real life and sort of real connections. One of the things that stands out to me really early is Ryan Goodman getting on the CNN food blog. Ryan actually had a difference of opinion from some articles that were there, and he kept having respectful dialogue in the comment section on those articles, and then next thing you knew, he was invited to be a contributor, and it was really pretty incredible. He was able to write stories about being on a feedlot and what that's like. Brian Scott also wrote some about growing crops and things along that line, so it was pretty incredible. There were a lot of major media successes over the years. I would say out of, things like the New York Times picking up people, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, finding people via Twitter and their blogs. One who's done that quite a bit is Wanda Patch up in Minnesota. Wanda has become a really good voice for pig and soybean farmers, and she's pretty fantastic. Another piece that I would consider is some of the conferences that we've really had people in agriculture get into. There's one called the 140 Conference that was held in New York and LA and San Francisco, and ultimately started holding some small townish ones. So in a couple of places in Iowa, Des Moines, I think, and Ames maybe. There was also Hutchinson, Kansas a few years. And getting on stage alongside people, much like a TED Talk, but much more focused on local for some of that. And the range of topics was amazing. I mean, you could go from somebody talking about how food is produced and things along that line to somebody talking about social programs to really care for members of their community, or how does a small town liquor store offer different services, and how do you get your small town to come back? Or one of my favorites was in LA where we had farmers on the stage, and the same stage had Chameleonaire, so it brought new ideas to Riding Dirty. Anyway, I could still do that parody, I think, but that was really cool, so I hope that helps.
Hey, it's Jazzy, and wow, I am blown away that you've been on Twitter for a decade. Tell me, what's one of your biggest takeaways from being there in that space for a decade?
My biggest takeaway is probably that you can start something on a whim, a total whim, not know what you're going to do, not know how it's going to go. And if you work at it and you kind of focus on it, you can have a long-term difference. You can make a long-term contribution. And I think those of us in agriculture who've been out there trying to connect to people that have questions about their food have really been able to do that. Some days it feels less like it than others. And sometimes there's real specific kind of prompt for us to do it. But I think the power is there, and looking at it as a long-term thing instead of short-term really was helpful. It adds, it lets you know that you can take it a little bit slower, you can do things in a way that everybody is comfortable with, not just you. Whew, wow, that was kind of fun to answer so many questions. I I really wasn't sure I was going to do this, and it seemed like a really good time. I think, as we look at the ag space online today, this year I got to go to Germany and talk to farmers over there. We have so many great folks in the UK and folks down under and Spanish-speaking folks, and there's a translate tweet button that makes it so much easier. There are people, I get to see folks from South Africa and from Kenya and things. It is fragmented more, where you can, but that's kind of nice, because if you can choose YouTube as your thing or Instagram as your thing, you can choose that, and you don't need to be on Twitter. Like, it's really kind of nice if you can do a few things, because they always end up adding to each other. But to me, if you look forward from now for the next decade, is where I'm really excited. I'm not sure where we're headed. I'm not sure what we'll accomplish, but I didn't have a clue what was going to happen 10 years ago when I got on either. So I'm not really worried about not knowing. I think it just will take us being creative, right? And like see what's coming and take advantage of it. And otherwise, I think that's gonna be a wrap. I'm gonna have to get this edited and sent out. But I really appreciate everybody who sent in videos, because I wasn't sure if I did this what I would say, so it really made it so much easier to have some friends helping me out. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, you can catch me online at 2 different blogs now. 100%cotton.com, spell it all out, 100%cotton.com, and jploveslife.com. I'm JP Loves Cotton on all my social media channels. Thanks a lot.